en el transcurso de la presente tarde del 6º Congreso CREAD Andes y del 6º Encuentro Virtual Educa Ecuador. Antes de dar inicio al desarrollo de la siguiente mesa, que corresponde a la tercera, queremos señalarles algunas indicaciones a cada uno de ustedes para el desarrollo de la presente jornada. El registro de asistencia se estará desarrollando tras culminada esta tercera mesa y de la misma manera se volverá a registrar el ingreso al acto de inauguración en el Teatro Benjamín Carrión, para lo cual los participantes cuentan con los buses de la universidad, quienes los trasladarán a este punto de nuestra ciudad. Y de la misma manera, tras culminado el acto de inauguración, se procederá a hacer un nuevo registro. Queremos solicitar a cada uno de ustedes comedidamente guardar el silencio correspondiente para el desarrollo de la presente jornada. Como lo habíamos señalado, esta tercera mesa, que la va a presidir el doctor Santiago Acosta. En la misma nos acompañan Nora Scarpini, Jan Chinsang, Steven Marshall y Mutota Kigoto. Con ellos continuaremos en esta tercera mesa. Bienvenidos, bienvenidas.
Good afternoon. So we're going to begin this session in the afternoon. It will be conducted in English, and I have the pleasure to introduce the first speaker, Nora Skaburskiene. I'll read a very brief introduction of her resume. Nora Skaburskiene has worked in the field of quality assurance since 2001. She serves as the director of the Center for Quality Assessment in Higher Education of Lithuania since 2013. In 2017, Nora Skaburskiene was elected as the president of a network of Central and Eastern European Quality Assurance agencies in higher education. Currently, she is also a vice president of the European Association for Quality Assurance in Higher Education. She has wide-ranging experience of participating in local and international projects. As an expert, she took part in a number of external reviews of higher education institutions and quality assurance agencies. She's an author of several publications on the issues of quality assurance published in national as well as international press, and has a wide list of presentations in various international and national events. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello. I hope you're not sleepy after a nice lunch we had. So it's really nice to be there, invited by the conference, and to hear that the issues of e-learning are really of particular importance around the globe, in different countries, in different continents. So it's really nice to be there, although I'm actually a representative of quality assurance, of European quality assurance area, and we'll talk more about the problems that are particularly important in European higher education area. So very shortly, I'm coming from Lithuania, from quite far away from there. So you see a small spot here in the middle of Europe. So I'm coming from a country where we have all 4 seasons, summer, winter, and so on. Just very briefly about higher education in Lithuania. With a 3 million population, we have around 130,000 student body, 42 higher education institutions, and more than 1,500 study programs of the first and second cycle. But here I'm also representing two networks of quality assurance. This is European Association for Quality Assurance in Higher Education and Central and Eastern Quality Assurance Agencies Network. ENQA actually is working a lot in the European higher education area in the field of quality assurance. So it's a membership organization of external quality assurance agencies. The main feature is that to become a full member, you have to undergo external review in accordance with the European standards and guidelines. So means that we are not only assessing the higher education institutions or their programs, but we are assessed as well. The main Bible, as we say in Europe, for the quality assurance is European standards and guidelines. They were developed and adopted in 2005. They were renewed and again adopted in 2015. So this is the main document for all quality assurance frameworks in different European countries. And actually the scope of ESG, it's not the quality as such, but these are standards and guidelines for quality assurance. And actually they are applied to all higher education offered in European countries, regardless of the mode of study or the place of delivery, either this transnational education or e-learning or short courses. It also applies to all types of quality assurance activities, quality audits, institutional reviews, program accreditations, etc. And they provide a framework for different national quality assurance frameworks and for institutional activities in internal quality assurance as well. But of course, quality assurance agencies, they cannot guarantee the quality of higher education. The higher education institutions themselves have the primary responsibility for the provision of the processes and for its assurance, of course. And quality assurance responds to the diversity of higher education systems, the institutions and programs and students' bodies. And quality assurance as well supports the development of a quality culture. 3 years ago, European University Association did a very interesting survey how e-learning is incorporated in studies of European higher education. So this guide presents the analysis and the results of the survey, and it was published 3 years ago. But the main message coming from the survey was that e-learning is really becoming more popular within higher education in Europe, but only 1/3 of the respondents, so there were 250 answers in total from different higher education institutions, said that they considered the approach of quality of e-learning. So meaning studies delivered by e-learning are there, but not every institution cares about the quality assurance of them. And actually, as I told, that European standards and guidelines, they are very generic. And the national frameworks have to adopt them and embed in their national legislation and the institutions themselves as well. So European standards and guidelines, they have a 3-part structure, and the first part is meant for internal quality assurance within higher education institutions. The second part is for external quality assurance as a system, and the third part is for external quality assurance agencies. Yes, we don't have a separate standards or guidelines for quality assurance of e-learning, and we started to get a lot of requests from our member agencies asking how e-learning could be quality assured within the national systems and within higher education institutions. And in responding to that, ENQA have organized and approved a working group that was discovering the practices in different countries, different institutions, and they were trying to do an analysis and to present some results for all quality assurance agencies. So this working group has worked already for 1.5 years, and they have drafted already preliminary results that could be used by the national systems and by higher education institutions as well. What was interesting, so they analyzed different practices from different countries, how quality assurance is embedded in e-learning. And the group decided to provide the recommendations with the additional criteria or indicators according to each ESG standard, how they could be used for e-learning. I will try quickly to present the draft results of these working groups. As the time is very short, so I will try to go briefly through the slides, but after the conference, the slides will be available, so you will be able to use and look at them. So most of the work and most of the recommendations were given for the part first for the internal quality assurance, because this part belongs to the higher education institutions who are also responsible for their own processes. So in regard to the first standard, policy for quality assurance, so the group recommended that e-learning should be a part of the overall strategy for the institution's development as well as policy for quality assurance. And it's very important that the policies and the structures should keep in mind the e-learning, so a part of delivery of the process of studies. And also the policy and code of practices for unethical behavior, they should be here for e-learning as well. And students, it doesn't matter if they are not presented in the campus, they should be involved in quality assurance processes within higher education institutions as well, meaning that students that are remote, they should also care about the processes of quality assurance. Design and approval of programs, this is very important standard, because it should care about a special focus on e-learning, how the curriculum should be adapted to the provision of e-learning. So what pedagogical practices should be there adapted to e-learning as well, and how the teaching staff should be involved into the evaluating of programs, and they should have the expertise for this specific kind of studies. And also students' needs should be considered when designing a curricula and keeping in mind that all the study content will be delivered online. Student-centered learning, teaching, and assessment. This standard actually causes a lot of challenges for higher education institutions because it's still finding its way to the studies, and this approach should be embedded in e-learning as well. So it's very important that the learning materials should fit pedagogical modes and also should be regularly reviewed and updated and aligned with the teaching methods. So the institutions should secure the methods are fit for purpose for assessment of e-learning. So other presenters already told about the importance of the teaching staff in e-learning and also support for teaching staff. So the fourth standard talks about student admission, progression, recognition, and certification. And certain indicators should be added for the e-learning so that the students who are entering higher education, and especially if the studies are delivered in distance education, they should be well informed about the requirements concerning the equipment, the e-learning, and technological skills, pre-knowledge, and prerequisites. So this is very important that the students should know the requirements before they enter the program. And they should also have information about the workload and the pedagogical modes that are used in the delivery of studies. And of course, recognition of prior learning. It's important in all kinds of delivery of studies. Teaching staff, this is also a very important point because they should be prepared for delivery of studies. Yes, of course, there are problems in higher education institutions with the older staff who need really better support, better advices from the administrative staff to prepare for that kind of studies. And meaning that higher education institutions, when thinking about delivery of online education, They should think about the profile of the teaching staff as well, for them to be able to respond to their duties. And also support services for teachers, they should be there, they should be adequate, accessible, and timely. Learning resources and student support. Yes, this is also important. And it's important not only technical infrastructure should be there in the higher education institutions, but also security measures should be taken into account very carefully. And also institutions should provide students with adequate learning resources like e-libraries or virtual labs if there is a need for them. Another part of learning resources and student supports is about student support. Yes, technical support as well as pedagogical support as well as administrative support is very important. And student support should be offered according to the student's profile and their specific needs, because in different study fields, different support is needed. Yes, okay, thank you, 3 minutes, so I will be quicker now. Information management, so yes, institutions have to collect and analyze data and use for the regular update of courses in e-learning as well. I will skip public information and ongoing monitoring because it's equally important for the studies the institution is producing as for e-learning courses. Another important thing, I would stop near the quality assurance systems. Implementing processes. There is a certain chain that is set for all the processes of quality assurance within the European higher education area that should include self-assessment done by higher education institution, external assessment with a site visit to the higher education institution, publication of the report, and consistent follow-up. So in this case, there should be a special focus on e-learning in each self-evaluation produced by higher education institution. As well, there should be certain tools used for the site visit, meaning that the expert should have all the passwords and accessibility to e-learning resources, and they should also have a visit to the location where the most of institutional technical infrastructure is situated. So special focus in this process of external quality assurance should be focused on e-learning. And additional requirements for peers, for the review experts. When we conduct an external quality assurance and invite experts, if there is a study program that is offered as e-learning course, there should be at least one expert with the expertise in the field that he could verify if the process is in good condition and verify the e-learning resources. So this is important to keep in mind. So other standards for external quality assurance, they do not require additional approach. They should be used in the same way as for the rest of study modes. But what are the challenges for quality assurance agencies and higher education institutions? So it's important that the agencies should develop external quality methodologies that take into consideration particularities of e-learning. It doesn't mean that the agencies have to develop separate methodologies. No, but they should involve certain indicators particularly important for e-learning. And traditional universities providing e-learning or blended programs should adapt the internal quality assurance systems in order to guarantee that the quality of the teaching and learning process is secured. So thank you for your attention.
We thank Nora Skaburskine for her presentation about quality assurance systems in Europe. And the next speaker is Yansing Zhang from Asia Pacific Quality Network. I'll read a brief resume of her career. Professor Yansing Sang is president of Asia Pacific Quality Network, the largest non-profit, non-government organization in quality assurance of higher education in the Asia Pacific region. She serves as chief expert of Yunnan Higher Education Evaluation Center, director of research sector of higher education in the Research Institute of Higher Education in Yunnan University, and advisor of Council for Higher Education Accreditation International Quality Group in USA. She's been greatly involved in the practice and research of quality assurance. She organized over 20 on-site evaluations to higher education institutions and 2015 APQN conference in China designed the framework of program evaluations, conducted for workshops on external QA evaluations in Pakistan, reviewed Fiji Higher Education Commission and Russian Register in the on-site review of Asia Pacific Quality Register, as well as on-site review of CHEA CIQG Quality Platform Review on the student learning outcomes. Observed in AUN actual quality assessment at program level, twice presented in Asia Pacific Sub-Regional Preparatory Conference for World Conference on Higher Education, and participated in International Forum for Education 2021, organized by East-West Center in USA. She has visited over 50 countries and regions on various academic assignments. You have the floor. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. And dear guests from all over the world, and dear teachers, organizers, students from UTPL, it's really my great pleasure to share ideas with you today. Though I come from China, the largest population in the whole world, but today I just want to share experience from the Asia Pacific region. And what I'm going to talk, it is global, 3 parts, global challenges in this region, and then commitment and the challenges from APQN. And the last one, talk about internationalization, accreditation of APQN. Part 1, for the global challenge in quality assurance of internationalization. And as you know, the borders are geography, boundaries of political entities that separate but also connect peoples from all over the world. And in this world, the famous writer Thomas Friedrich, he said the world is flat because everything is at our hands. We are villagers from the whole globe. And since the founding of APQN, we have committed to the internationalization of quality assurance. Globalization and a blessing or a disaster for developing countries. And as you know, in the past we talk about localization, but today we tend to talk more about globalization, because in this time we think, can they combine perfectly together? Is it the standards of the European or the West country or from developing country? Or it is equal for non-speaking English countries? All of the questions are waiting for us to answer. And for the disadvantage of high education internationalization, we can think knowledge system and tendency of a high education flow and education system and returners abroad. All of the 4 trends are not good for the developing countries. Higher education internationalization was set as it is defined by UN. It is a process of transactional and cross-cultural perspective and atmosphere combined with universities, teaching, scientific research, everything. And it combines all the things together. And it is not only activity, but a program and a process and a tendency to, and globalization in all its device and form has shaped our own life. In the MOOC, the professor said with an example, just one single book, the paper is made in China, and printing is made in Singapore, and printing process is made in Germany and Japan, and the typesetting is in India, and inks in Switzerland, and being authored in the USA, and the course is taught to all the people in the whole globe. So the world is really flat for us. And a survey of quality assurance, cross-border higher education. In this survey, we found it is made lots of people join this program, and we found it is a quite virtuous circle. Is 4 key funders. Number one, it is lack of information of the countries. 2, it is a trust gap. I don't trust you and you don't trust me either. And it is low levels of cooperation and the sheer diversity of all the nations. For the key challenges of Quach, and we risk to the reputation of higher education institutions, we have difficulty in recognition of the degrees. We have we don't balance of responsibilities of the universities, and the quality assurance process a conflict of standards, and we have consumer protections, diploma meals, and criticism of cultural imperialism, and we marketingization or commercialization of universities, all of the challenges for us in the internationalizations. So what shall we do? And for us, as a APQA, we're trying our best. 2003, we are funded. And 2009 is the secretary moved to China. And then 2012 is a great challenge for us because funding is ceased. 2016, we began our sustainable development of APQN. And for this first in Hong Kong, 2015, and what is Asian Pacific region, here we can see we have 51 countries and territories from all the region, and we have 222 members from 40 countries and territories. So it is the largest in this region, and we have the largest number of beneficiaries. The numbers grow each year, and for the practical exploration, dissolving boundaries for quality range, it is our final goal for APQN. What we'll struggle for is to realize dissolving boundaries for quality range. And each year we'll have the academic conference on QA, and next year it is in Sri Lanka. The topic is quality assurance in the Asia Pacific region is an insight into the future. And this one of the sub-theme, it is distance education. So you're welcome to join us on March 28th to 30 in Sri Lanka to talk about this topic. And for the folks on the QA tours, we have published a lot of books, toolkit of the assessing quality in higher education. We have cross-border higher education, road towards capacity building, have assessing quality in higher education, and the CHIPA principle. We have higher education evaluation and development. It's an academic journal. All of the books can be done from EPICIN website. And implementation of over 30 QA projects. And here we are focused on APQR. R is register. And for the APQR, Q is quality label. I'll talk about that later on. And for the internationalization, for the academic conference, we have, till now, we have over 76 events to hold on QA activities and seminars. And for the staff capacity building on QA, we have over 100 staff members has trained by us. And the international QA consultant database, now we have 188 consultants from 56 countries in the whole world as our experts in EPICIN website. And for the cooperation with national and international networks, we have cooperated with UNESCO, CHIA, CREAD in USA, we have INQUAHI, and the European Union, all of the QA organization we cooperated. And to become a member is just follow the EPICIN constitutions, and it's very easy to do. And in the past, we just accept the QAA to be members, but later on we realized quality assurance should be made by internal and external. So from 2010, we accept members from internal QA, it is universities. And for international standards of guidance for the EPICIN, we have all kinds of guidance, just a close relationship with other organizations. And CRQG, we can say all of them. And the last one is the internationalization accreditation of Asian Pacific quality label. On this part, we just want to see, as we talked before, in this global society, we think the world is flat, we can be friends together, but the reality is not true. We lack of contrast. I'm afraid to come here before I come here. It's the first time for me, because I'm a little doubt about the people here. Maybe there are some things not very safe, but when I come here, everything goes well. So, in just my personal experience, but for the higher education, it is also lack the trust, lack of information. So we would like to put the internationalization of accreditation of QA in this range. And as we mentioned before, that's a virtuous circle of solutions. Concept and facilitate mutual understanding, just like this conference, the 3 days, will make us understand the different concepts from different countries. So it is it's a term, conception should come to the same platform. And action 2 is we should establish a regular channel of communication to share development in the respective national settings, to understand each other, to share resources and approaches to seek for the good quality of education. And the background for seek for quality, as we see, quality is not only the persons from universities, but it is also the responsibility from both university and outside of university, even all all the stakeholders from the whole society, we should have the responsibility of education. I have 3 minutes? Okay. And for the purpose of APQR, we would like to establish the standards to combine, to make everybody realize what is a good quality internationalization set of standards. And we would like to promote the mobility of students, mobility of teachers, research, everything. It's free. Come here and free come and free go. Easy come, easy go. And for the process, the quality label, we have just as other evaluations, we have 7 steps. And for the criteria indicator of QA label, this we just focus on internationalization. We have 5 criteria, 12 indicators, and 34 indicators. But as this morning I learned a lot from other speakers. In the past, we just focused on the traditional higher education, but from the beginning of this year, we realized the long distance education, virtual education should be one part of education. So from the beginning of this year, we began focus on the distance education. This is the guideline or standards that were made 7 years ago, and we would like very much to update this. And here we see we have the providing institution programs, resources, and the recipients. And we have 4 criteria, and we have 13 indicators. Now, that's not enough. We would adapt it by this way to get it better. And this is GOI for quality label. Is APQL, Asian Pacific Quality Label, on either internationalization or distance education. And for the quantitative information on the APQL, for that, we only have 21, and people asked why so few. We said, in this information age, more means less. People cannot understand everything, so we would like just focus on the crucial elements, not include everything. And for the quantitative methods, we use SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to analyze, even if this university failed, but we try to point out their opportunities and their future development directions. And for a schedule of review visit, we have 4 days to do, and the cost rate just 5,400 USD, and people surprised. So little money, and my answer is, we do quality assurance not for money. We just want to promote the quality. That is the reason the price is very low. You can never find any review such low price. And then for the senior APQA committee, we have this. We have 4 criteria types, and fully achieved and substantially achieved, that is acceptance, but the others, they are feared. Even if they feared, they encouraged them to improve. In China, we have a slogan to call that, by evaluation, we build. By evaluation, we promote. So evaluation is not come to criticize you, but help you find your own weakness and make you forward. And this is APQ certificate, is APKL. It's like this, and for APQR, it is a continuous quality improved circle. We should first plan, and we deploy it, develop it, and then we check, and then we action, improve again. This is a reproductive process for all of us to go. It's a long, long way to go for all of us to reach our goal of dissolving boundaries for quality range, and that is why I come here, and you are, I'm very happy that you invited AP Queen to be here, and we think if it's a long way to go, but if you have a strong commitment to your goals and dream, if you wake up every day with a passion to do your own job, everything is possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Sang, for your presentation on the Asia-Pacific view on quality assurance. And now we turn to the third speaker, Stephen Marshall, from the Australasian Council of Open, Distance and E-Learning, Australasia. He will deal with the topic of benchmarking for the future, educational improvement in Oceania. Dr. Stephen Marshall is Associate Professor at the Victoria University of Wellington Centre for Academic Development and President of the Australasian Council on Open and Distance Education. Stephen leads the Victory University Digital Vision and Strategy for Learning and Teaching initiatives and researches in the areas of e-learning benchmarking, plagiarism, and academic integrity, intellectual property, and the development of educational policy and strategy supporting and encouraging the effective use of technology. He is co-creator of the internationally recognized and applied e-learning maturity model and author of the 2018 Springer book, Shaping the University of the Future, using technology to catalyze change in university learning and teaching. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the kind people from UTPL to make it possible for me to come to visit Ecuador. It's the first time I've come to Latin America, and it's been very friendly, and I've much appreciated the hospitality. Particularly wanted to say thank you to Karina for her looking after me and making it possible, but also all of the other staff from UTPL. Today I'd like to talk a slightly different topic to what some of the other speakers have talked about, which is this idea that when we engage in talking about the quality of education, higher education, that we necessarily understand what it is that we need to do in order to be successful for our countries, for our societies, and for the success of our students. And one of the problems that we have is that much of what we do in our universities, particularly the elite universities that everybody tries to copy, are about the success of a minority, and we have to ask ourselves, what is it that we can do to shift our thinking about education so that we make all people successful, not just the people who are wealthy enough and able to use the traditional or the established techniques. So we need to be open to the idea that there are new techniques. So what I'm going to talk about today are some work that we've done in Australia and in New Zealand, which is designed to build and strengthen our universities to think about new ways of approaching what they do while maintaining the quality, and also to influence the policies of governments that create the conditions that constrain often what universities can do. So thank you. So I'm representing ACODE, which is a member organisation based in New Zealand and Australia and in the Pacific, and we have approximately 50 university members. And ACODE is designed to help those universities work with each other to learn how to use technology and how to improve the educational outcomes for their organisations. So we operate at an organisational level, and our role is to influence the governments in our countries to make it possible for our organisations to do well in their jobs. So I'm going to talk today about two major pieces of work that we've done, the ACODE benchmarks, which I'll talk about first, and then some work based on my e-learning maturity model in New Zealand. The ACODE benchmarks in particular have been a very useful tool influencing the Australian government's thinking about online learning, e-learning, distance learning, and the Australian Quality Assurance Agency, TEXA, is in the process of creating an emerging standard for online learning for Australian universities, but I'll leave Mutuotua to talk about TEXA and how things are done in Australia. In New Zealand, the work that I'm doing is leading to a new framework based on the e-learning maturity model designed to help universities and other organisations that deliver education work together in collaboration and think about what they need to be for the future rather than trying to continue to be what they have been in the past. So first of all, I'd like to talk about the ACODE benchmarks, and these cover 8 areas of technology-enhanced learning, and each of these areas is able to be chosen by an institution to explore what it is that they are doing in that space. So institutions can choose to look at all 8 of these benchmarks, or they can choose to pick 1 or 2 of them at a time, depending on their situation. The focus of the ACODE benchmarking approach is very much around collaboration. So the intent for these benchmarks is not to create a standard and to tell people how to do things, but rather to provide a point of conversation between people within a university to help them start thinking about how they can change things, and also between universities. So for each of these benchmarks, we have a statement about what it is that needs to be considered in the organisation and a ranking system, but this is not based on a normative scale. This isn't a standard. This is for you, for yourself and your institution. How do you feel about how well this is happening? And the important part of the process is the group conversation that we have when we bring people together every 2 years to talk about their benchmarks, and the information that they share in that conversation and the relationships and the exploration of the future. That's the value in what we do, not the building of everybody doing the same thing, but rather understanding the different ways and the different challenges that the organisations have. And when we look at the results that people have, these are the different results that people give from different universities for just one area. You can see that there's quite a range of capability that people believe that they might have. And sometimes they're doing the same thing even though they give it a different number, because their expectations for what they can achieve are different. And the point here is that we're not ranking or comparing, but we're rather trying to learn from each other. This process has been very successful. We've now been running it for about 10 years, and we run the workshops every 2 years, and institutions from all over the world come and participate in that. And it's been sufficiently popular that last year we also ran with the Open University a version of the workshop in the United Kingdom with 15 United Kingdom universities. So that's now potentially running in parallel. That work has been, as I say, sufficiently influential that TEXA is now drawing on our experience of what all the universities are finding challenging and how they're engaging with it to create that new standard for Australia. I'm going to switch now to talk about maturity modelling, and here the focus again is not on a standard approach, but the capacity of institutions to grow and become stronger in responding to their environment. And maturity models imagine that people move through these 5 levels from their initial somewhat chaotic engagement, and then they learn some discipline and move forward until ultimately they are able to continuously improve or optimise what they do in their organisation. And the e-learning maturity model says that for a range of different activities that are necessary for successful e-learning, you need to think about how you are doing that activity, and that's an important thing and in common with many other standards. But also beyond that, you have to ask yourself, how are the systems of the organisation engaging with that activity to make sure that it's repeatable and of good quality? How are they framing the expectations? What are your internal standards and policies, and how do you train people so that they know what it is that the organisation expects? And then the 4th area, how do you monitor? How do you know that what is happening is working? How much is going on, whether it's successful for the people that it's involved with? And then finally, how are you systematically improving what you do to get beyond it? So it's not just that you do something, it's the organisational capability to do that thing better in the future and to cope with a rapidly changing environment. With this type of tool, we can then do visualizations and see capabilities across a whole range of organisations at the same time. And the visual model here allows you to see, for example, that there are areas of capability that many organisations across Australia and New Zealand share as common weaknesses. So, for example, that band of light colour towards the bottom there is the ability of organisations to talk to their students and their staff about what they expect from the use of technology and learning, and it turns out to be something that many institutions are not very good at. So this type of visualisation helps us to understand things that we have as common challenges and work together to come up with solutions. The other thing that you can do with this type of visualisation is you can see over time, as you try to make things happen in an institution, how well that change has happened in the institution, and you can visualise the impact of it. So, for example, for the institution here on the left-hand side, you can see that some areas have improved because they're green, whereas a number of areas at the bottom have gone red. They have in fact got worse at those things. And this is a university that had an e-learning strategy and knew what they were doing, and then lost their way and failed to pay attention to what they were doing. Institution in the middle, on the other hand, has lots of green all the way across, and they have a very strong strategy, and they're actively thinking about how to be better at what they do. The last institution is a typical university. It's not doing anything at all. It's just sitting there very quietly. Not everyone changes. This work has now led us to doing something with the New Zealand government, with the Tertiary Education Commission, who have a ministerial goal to make our system more responsive and less rigid and constrained by accountability and audit and quality assurance, and more capable of doing things in the future that are innovative and agile and responsive to a rapidly changing world. And the focus here is not quality assurance. It's much more on quality improvement and responsiveness, because we believe that really we don't necessarily know what it is to be very successful as higher education now that we have all of these new tools. And the objective of this work is to allow the government to say, if an organisation has these organisational capabilities to be agile and responsive, and to manage it well and to have the good systems, then we can reduce the compliance burden and reduce the control of that organisation and work with them to help us lead change into the future. So this is what we have created as the focus areas for the capability framework for the next year. And you can see that it's not to do with how we teach or things like that, but it's much more about what are the relationships between organisations and other stakeholders, so people outside of the higher education system, but people who work with our graduates and with our staff, collaboration in the delivery of our courses and enabling students to move easily between different universities and other providers, and to collaborate in the infrastructure, to work on our staff, and to be led by people who understand the need to change their organisation. An important part of this framework is that this applies to not only universities in New Zealand, but also to vocational providers, private providers, and the New Zealand wānanga, which are the Indigenous tertiary education institutions. So this is covering many, many hundreds of institutions within New Zealand, from very, very small ones to very, very large ones. Behind this, what we have is a set of statements for each one of those these focus areas, where we ask things like, for the delivery, how are you doing this thing? And again, it's the same ranking scale that we've used with the e-learning maturity model. And the objective here is to help the government understand where there are challenges in particular parts of the country, or for particular types of students, or particular types of qualifications or subjects, and to visualise that in that diagram that I showed you earlier, in a way that helps people see those challenges, invest to fix them, and then see evidence that we are really improving what we see. You can read more about the sort of ideas behind my work in my book. Oh, Professor, I've got to sell my book to you. And I just want to conclude by thanking the various organisations in New Zealand and Australia that have supported this research over the last 20 years. And thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Professor Marshall, for your presentation. and for being within the time. Thank you. And now for our fourth speaker is also from Australia, Mutoto Akigoto from the Open and Distance Learning Association of Australia, who will be talking about the useful models in accreditation of courses and online learning. Professor Mutoto Akigoto has successfully taught English language and literacy in both face-to-face as well as online programs at the University of New England in Australia for 9 years. The university is a leading provider of distance education. Undergraduates constitute about 85% of a students' cohorts studying online. They are enrolled to train to be teachers in primary school and in secondary school. Mutoto has also taught research students enrolled both face-to-face and online in doctoral and master's programs at the university. He has a long experience working in the distance education arena. He has 9 years' experience delivering online programs. He is currently president of the Open and Distance Learning Association of Australia. This is the peak body in distance education in Australia, addressing matters of delivery and advocacy for its members. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the organizers of this conference, especially Corina and Jose Barbazo, the chairman of this organizing committee. I have come from Australia, and I'm very happy that my colleague, Stephen Marshall, has given you a bit of what we do within ODLA and ACOD. ODLA is the Open and Distance Learning Association of Australia. And ODLA has its own journal. Its own journal is called the Journal of Distance Education. And in this journal, we kind of push the agenda for distance education. We also organize conferences just like this one. We organize workshops, we organize seminars, and we have a very huge following in Australia. Now, Australia is a fairly large country, and I must also mention that it's also a continent. And because it's a country and a continent, you find that the regulatory bodies within the education system cut across, some at the federal level, at the country level, and then other regulatory bodies are at state level. So what I'm going to be discussing with you this afternoon is what happens at the national level, the body that caters for everyone within the country, and what happens at the state level. Now, within the state level, I am from the state of New South Wales, so I'll be talking about some of the regulations of the regulatory bodies within New South Wales. And I'll also be talking about the larger body that, like I said, takes care of the entire nation. So I've kind of organized the talk inside about 5 key areas. First of all, I'll be talking about what is called the Tertiary Education Quality Assurance Quality Agency. We call it TEXA, and Stephen has already mentioned a few things about TEXA. I'll be talking about some leading institutions in Australia, leading in the sense that they are at the forefront of online learning. And specifically, I'll talk about the university for which I work. It's called the University of New England. I'll tell you how we operate and how we try our best to keep within the set standards. And then I'll also be talking about what other what models can be applied or are applied within Australia and might be applied in other parts of the world. So let's talk about accreditation and assessment of courses. We all know very much that assessment is a factor of both the student and the lecturer. Assessment is also a factor about the institution. It tells you a lot about the institution and the students. And when we talk about students here, we talk about the online students and those who are on campus, those who are doing it face-to-face. So when we talk about standards, they should be standards that apply to both cohort of students. I say this because I work for the University of New England, which has about 85% of the students enrolled to do their programs online, and only about 15% stay or undertake their programs on face-to-face basis. So we must then attend to the expectations of both the syllabus documents, and we must also attend to the expectations of the regulatory bodies. So the body that is most at the top of everything else there is called TEXA, which is the Tertiary Education Quality Standards Agency. It was established in Australia in 2011. And the big question that, or the main role they have to do is to ensure that all the bodies that are members of the tertiary institutions comply with the expectations of this quality assurance body. The question will be, do the courses meet the criteria of that body? Do they, for example, admit students that, that can do university work? Now, we say admit students here because we have very many students that come with qualifications that, with the education that might require a bit of boosting. And for example, we have got the students who come in with very poor language when they qualify from high school, and they have to make sure that they go through what is called the Education of Overseas Students Scheme, ESOS. And ESOS is within that body that regulates the kind of language level required for students to undertake university training. And in Australia, we have very, very many universities that have online students, and they too must subscribe to the requirement of ESOS. Okay, I've already mentioned what TEXA is, and I'll be talking a little bit more about TEXA in a very short while. But I want to now just briefly talk about what is called the Higher Education Standards Framework. The Higher Education Standards Framework, what I'm calling HES, or it's usually called HES. Now, the Higher Education Standards Framework has been structured to align with the student experience of the student life cycle. In other words, the progress they make within the time that they're going to be enrolled as university students. This framework is grounded on a few expectations. One, that people do what the syllabus requires them to do. They organize courses that address the syllabus demands, and they also ensure that those courses that they have organized can be tested, and you show evidence that they have been tested accordingly, and the students have met the expectations within what the framework states. Now, so it is based on about 7 items that govern this higher education framework. One of them being the fact that it requires students' participation and attainment. That's the primary goal. Students go to university to learn. They want to do the exams and pass. Then it talks about the learning environment, the teaching, the institutional quality assurance, what the institution does to ensure that there is quality going on within their programs, What about governance? And what about representation, information, and information management systems? It also requires people to do sufficient research, and students get research skills that they require. Now that information can be represented in a diagram, which I have put before you there. It's just a summary of those 7 points. Now then, higher education standards framework is expected to make the various standards easier to apply for purposes of the provider's own internal monitoring, reporting, governance activities, as well as Texas regulatory processes. When we talk about own governance, we're trying to say that the universities themselves, or the tertiary institutions themselves, have to have their own systems of ensuring that students are being taught the right things, or rather using the right syllabus, that whatever they're being taught, again, meets those standards, and it is tested, and there's verifiable evidence that they have gone through what the standards say. Now, the students themselves are taken care of because they're also given a voice. They are also given a chance to assess the providers, or to assess the lecturers, the professors. And that's a very important thing, because the lecturers must be accountable to the students. And that is one way of ensuring that they are not sleeping behind the wheel. Okay. Those standards have to be high enough so that it is not everybody who gets through easily, but you have to struggle and pass through some very high standards. And that's why it's higher education. So, those standards, there are a few things that are quite common to what we have had in this conference. They ensure that the barrier to entry into higher education sector is set sufficiently high to underpin and protect the quality of reputation of the sector, to establish a baseline, and also a baseline quality and integrity from which all providers can continue to build excellence and diversity. Those standards in Australia, we have the requirement that they also serve as an articulation of the expectations of provision of higher education. They become a reference point for international comparisons, so that we know that what we are doing measures of fits within what everybody else is doing within the world. Now, a model framework with which higher education providers can themselves apply, or it provides a model framework that higher education providers can apply upon themselves, and making sure that there is quality assurance. I've talked about some of the leading institutions, and have given you a list of 5 institutions that have been suggested by groups that deal with open and online education. They include the University of New England, that's my home university, Deakin University, Edith Cowan University, the University of Southern Queensland, and Charles Sturt University. Now, I will just mention then that within the University of New England, we have been rated as one of the top 5 universities for giving students or getting high quality overall experience. It has, sorry, I need to say that quite clearly. It has had a 5-star rating on student satisfaction for about 7 years now. 5-star rating for student satisfaction. And that is not a mean achievement. It is the only university in Australia to have gotten that kind of classification. And it tells you a lot about how we value online and distance education. Now, Charles Sturt University, if you were to look at their website, you find that they have a very good definition of assessment. They say that assessment is a central feature of teaching and the curriculum. It powerfully frames how students learn and what students achieve. It is one of the most significant influences on students' experience of higher education and all that they gain from it. A very strong and leading statement about what assessment is. They also say, another thing we need to know about assessment is that it needs to be well developed by people who understand what assessment literacies are. That is, what language is used within assessment. How do you decide what is being achieved and what has not been achieved? Assessment also looks at teachers being central in creating the much needed assessment reform. Assessment is something that is ongoing. Assessment reform is necessary, but it has to come from the people, the drivers, the key drivers here, and teachers are supposed to be key drivers in assessment reform. But they need the language to go about that. That's what we're calling the literacies of assessment. And then the authors, Val Krenowski and Claire Wyatt Smith, have said that another very important consideration is ethical practice. And this is considered as an important feature of assessment. Ethical practice here, meaning that whatever you're doing, not only caters for every student that you have, including the students that might have disabilities. And that is crucial because in this world of technology, the coming world of technology, we find that you need to think about the students who have visual problems and they are required to look at the screen almost most of the time. And you have to ask yourself what you're going to do to meet their requirements. And most important of all, when it comes to testing, we want to ask ourselves what is new about testing. And testing online can be it has proved to be very, very problematic. You want to make sure that students don't cheat. And what is being developed now is instances where students can do a test at any time of their choosing. They're given a chance to nominate 2 hours within their day where they go into a room. The room is fitted with cameras so that the cameras monitor students. They monitor who is in the room, what is in the room, and the student is asked to move the camera around so that the examination room is seen to be clear of any writings or anything that might be helping the student in attaining or cheating in exams. And then the students, there is a computer system now that can determine your speed of typing, and it is able to, they ask you, the teacher will ask you to type something, and that speed is recorded so that when it comes to doing the tests, there is something that can be compared with what is seen as authentic. That means that you cannot get anybody to come in and type stuff for you. So it records the features of the room, it records your typing speed, even a lot of other items of technology. And that in itself frees people in very many ways. It is very, very economical for the universities to go that way because they don't have to pay to hire rooms for invigilation. They don't have to pay invigilators. The computer itself will be an invigilator. The student does the tests at their own time, and they select the time they want to do the test, and they just tell the university, and the university gives them the test, which is a very innovative thing to do, and it is being adopted now and becoming very, very popular, so that the numbers are just shooting. People feared that system, but now they're accepting it, and they love it. So that tells you a lot about equity. It tells you about ethical practice. It also gives people that freedom to do tests when when they choose, at the time of their choosing. And that is what I'm explaining in that particular slide about innovation in online testing, a very important thing that we are spearheading at the University of New England. And like I said, it requires somebody to install cameras in the room. It might be appearing like it's expensive, but if you consider you don't have to travel, the kind of money that the university has been spending in vegetation and so on, this is a very big saving and it's very, very innovative. And we hope that it can only grow. And institutions are coming to UNE to see how that system is managed. So I was also going to mention the fact that within the national level, we have got NAPLAN, which is the National Assessment Plan for Literacy and Numeracy, and it is also going online. So things are going digital, and that's a positive thing. It shows progress, and people need to learn how to use those digital systems. I've mentioned there that we have a national body known as ACARA, which is the Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority, which also is an overriding national body that helps with keeping standards and assessment. I've already mentioned about teaching online at UNE. I am myself a lecturer in the area of literacy education, and we have these systems, and we give preference to, or we give a bit of sufficient attention to assessment literacies and assessment reform. I've mentioned standards, teacher judgment, moderation, a key thing within assessment. And TEXA is something I mentioned earlier on. That's the Teaching Education Quality Standards Authority. And therefore, what I'm suggesting to you is that if there are any models that you might want to gather about Australia, it will be mostly anything to do with online testing. That's where we can possibly be of help or make a difference in your life, justifying my presence around here. So with those few remarks, like I say, students have time to respond to whatever programs they are given. And also want to mention that when you come to Sydney, the biggest attraction you get there will be the Sydney Opera House, a picture of which I've given you in that final slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kigoto, for your presentation. And though we are a little bit out of schedule, I think that we have a couple of minutes for questions. As a matter of fact, we have received some questions from the audience. So before the coffee break, we'll give a chance to our speakers to answer those questions. First, Stephen, please, you have the question? Okay.
The question I've been asked is, how does it feel to live in the country with the largest concentration of poisonous animals? That's my friend Butuota, who lives in Australia, which is a very dangerous country to live in, so I don't live there. I live in New Zealand, which is the country with the least number of poisonous animals. It's a very safe country. You can drink the water, you can walk around in the forests, and there's absolutely nothing in New Zealand that will harm you in the way of harmful animals or poisonous animals. So, yeah.
Yes. Can I?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I want to assure you that, yes, Australia has got very many poisonous animals, and the most important thing as well is to know that Australia is large. It's a very large, it's a big island, and there are many animals that might want to run away, but they can't go away because we are surrounded by water. We're surrounded by the sea, but we love our animals and we coexist. And you're not going to be the only person there, so don't you worry, it is livable.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I also got two questions. The first one, what are the chances of distant education graduates to get a job outside your country? I would say that if the graduates are awarded a qualification or diploma by the recognized higher education institutions, there are 100% chances to get a job in the country and outside as well. It depends if it's recognized institution. So this is most important, that it's accredited and it provides programs or courses that are recognized by the state. So in the European Union, if one country is recognized, its study programs are recognized, diplomas are recognized within this country, so the graduate can go to any other country of European Union and get job there freely. So these are no options. Another question is about what's the greatest challenge in distant education, taking into account that all Latin American countries are developing countries and do not have suitable resources. So yes, I think this is quite a complicated and challenging question, because it's not easy for the higher education institution to develop all the infrastructure, learning infrastructure for delivery of online courses. So it requires good preparation from the side of institution in terms of teacher preparation. They have to be prepared to deliver courses, to assess in distance education. The good infrastructure is also very important. So really institutions face a lot of challenges in providing online education. And what is also important, the massification makes institutions sometimes to involve everybody in the courses, and that reflects in the big dropout rates. So meaning that they should care about the preparedness of the students as well. They have to be ready to take online courses. So I think there's not only one challenge, there's a lot of challenges in producing, in delivering online education. So an institution really should think a lot before starting this kind of delivery, because it's also the responsibility of the institution to provide quality in e-learning as well.
Can I also just say that the other challenge is to not mistake what other institutions have done in other countries as being the pathway that you have to follow yourself to be successful. You don't have to reproduce the entire history of United Kingdom higher education or American higher education to be successful today. And much as we wouldn't build a traditional old-fashioned telegraph line and then build a telephone line and then have cell phones, now you can jump straight to the most modern technologies. So the challenge is to understand what technologies are available and then to think about how they suit your own context and give you an opportunity to do things that might be better than rebuilding exactly the same systems that other countries have because of their history, rather than because they're necessarily the best systems for them today.
Oh, okay. My question is, the quality label that given by APQA is officially approved by the government? Fortunately, my answer is no. People were wondering, government doesn't approve, but you said fortunately. Why? I think it's true because historically speaking, the quality assurance in Asian Pacific region, it is launched and promoted by the government. It is a culturally heritage that is everything said by the government. We think it is legal, it is right. It's true in the past. Now, China has come to the fifth circle of evaluation. In the past, if it is the government said go for the quality label, everybody would go. But now, come to this stage, and we realized quality is not the responsibility of the government, but the responsibility of every person in higher education. It is mine, it is yours, it is all the people who are really love education. So the trend of the evaluation in Asia Pacific Ocean region has been turned from mandatory state to volunteer state. So our quality label is just, we don't need to approve the government. It is a kind of action or initiative organized and will be promoted by the QAAs, not only QA internal, but external QAAs. So as I think you must have read one book called The Fourth Generation of Evaluation by Lincoln. In that book, he also thinks the quality should be voluntary, not ordered by the government. Thank you.
One last question for Stephen. Oh, no, sorry, the professor. Yeah.
I've been given a question here. What are the main stakeholders for developing higher education in Australia? And what happens when there is no government support? How can education be improved and have an impact in Australia? This is a question of funding, and the alternative models lie, well, I start by saying who are the main stakeholders? The parents who have students there. If you have a parent, if you are a student, sorry, if you are a parent with a student there, you are a stakeholder. Some students themselves are parents, so they're also stakeholders. Then you have education providers, all the universities and institutions of technical higher education, the TAFE colleges are all stakeholders. And of course the government is a stakeholder. Now, what happens if the government support is withdrawn? It is true that there has been reduced government support from time to time, and it continues to decrease or to diminish. And people must turn to research and see whether research can bring in some funding. We must turn to industry, get research that is also working together with the industry so that industry helps with some of that support. And also, another very unpalatable area has been overseas students. For a very long time, Australia has been accused of making use of overseas students as a milk cow, and they have been making a lot of money from overseas students. And I'm therefore saying that overseas students become a source of funding, but they also become stakeholders in the process. Thank you.
And the last question for Stephen Marshall.
So just also continuing from Mutuota, I think the main stakeholders, myself for higher education, are the communities that are affected by the educational activities. And that can just be employers, if you're thinking very much just about employment, but increasingly we need to think about wider community impact of higher education and the social agenda and addressing inequality. And for those types of higher education, the stakeholders become diverse and members of all of the different communities who seek to have a healthier society and greater success for future generations. I've also been asked, what are the indicators for learning environments for distance and higher education, and how do you assess it? So I think that the problem is that there are no shortage of indicators. There are literally thousands of indicators. You can, everyone today has shown you a different set of indicators. So I think there's no shortage of things that people tell you can be measured. I think, and the question is, how do you assess it? Well, obviously the indicator often tells you what measurement you need to take. The really important problem is, though, does that measurement mean anything, and does it tell you something that has value for the future of the educational activity that you're engaging in? And the real problem that we've got at the moment is that it's very, very easy to measure things that have no value. And so we talk about the number of times that students talk to another student in an online forum, or the number of pieces of content that are provided, or how long a student watches a video. None of these things have any evidence to show that they really make a difference in terms of people learning. So I think what we have to start being is much more critical of the indicators that we are offered and ask ourselves, what is the theory behind that? Where is the evidence to show us that that it is not simply somebody's opinion, but is something where there is a possibility that it really will change the nature of what we're doing?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much to all four speakers. They've done an excellent job in delivering their presentations, giving their focus on quality assurance systems in their respective regions in the world. And I think that we can grant them a very warm applause. Thank you. And the session is over.
Queremos agradecer a quienes han participado en esta tercera mesa y a los participantes externos y a los estudiantes. Les generamos algunas, en este caso, requerimientos que tendrán que cumplir. Se estará llevando el registro a la salida del Centro de Convenciones para cada uno de ellos y de la misma manera el COFI correspondiente. Así también queremos señalarles que a las 18 horas estará un bus de la universidad para trasladarlos al Teatro Benjamín Carrión, en el cual también tendrán que registrar su asistencia tanto al ingreso como a la salida. Les solicitamos nos ayuden con los dispositivos de traducción en los exteriores precisamente de este auditorio. Y queremos también a la señorita Ana Orellana acercarse al counter donde realizó el proceso de inscripción. Muchísimas gracias a cada uno de ustedes, a los participantes externos. Los invitamos también al coffee en el ala derecha de la presente sala. Muchas gracias y los esperamos en el acto de inauguración del 6º Congreso CREAD y 6º Encuentro Virtual Educa Ecuador. Buenas tardes.